Hi P3, Miss Duffy, Mrs. Cranston and I have been missing you so much, and we're really looking forward to seeing you all again at some stage soon, we hope. But while we can't see you, we thought it would be nice to share a story with you. We had a chat about which story we thought you might like, and we decided on George's Marvellous Medicine. It's by Roald Dahl, who's one of our favourite authors. So I'm going to do one chapter today, and then I'm going to hand the book on to Mrs. Cranston, and she's going to do a chapter, and then she's going to hand it on to Miss Duffy, who's going to do a chapter, and we'll put one chapter up each day. The chapter I'm going to do is called Grandma, and this is where we find out all about Grandma. I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning, so be a good boy and don't get up to mischief. This was a silly thing to say to a small boy at any time. It immediately made him wonder, what sort of mischief might he get up to? And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, Mother said. And then she went out, closing the door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked eye, and she said,
"Now, George, you heard what your mother said. Don't forget my medicine."
"No, Grandma," George said.
"And try to behave yourself for once while she's away."
"Yes, Grandma," George said. George was bored to tears. He didn't have a brother or a sister. His father was a farmer, and the farm was miles away from anywhere. There was never any children to play with, and he was tired at staring at pigs and hens and cows and sheep, and he was especially tired of having to live in the same house as his grizzly old grunion of a grandma. Looking after her all by himself was hardly the most exciting way to spend a Saturday morning.
"You can make me a nice cup of tea for a start,"
Grandma said to George.
"That'll keep you out of mischief for a few minutes."
"Yes, Grandma," George said. George couldn't help disliking Grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman. She had pale brown teeth and a small, puckered-up mouth, just like a dog's bottom. How much sugar do you want in your tea today, Grandma?" George asked her.
"1 spoon," she said. "No milk."
Most grandmas are lovely and kind and helpful ladies, but not this one. She spent all day, every day, sitting in her chair by the window, and she was always complaining, grousing, grouching, grumbling, griping about something or other. Never once, even on her best days, had she smiled at George and said, "Well, how are you this morning, George?" Or, "Why don't you and I have a nice game of snakes and ladders?" Or, "How was school today, George?" She didn't seem to care about other people, only about herself. She was a miserable old grouch. George went into the kitchen and made Grandma a cup of tea with a tea bag. He put 1 spoon of sugar in it and no milk, and he stirred the sugar well. He carried the cup up to the living room. Grandma sipped the tea.
"It's not sweet enough," she said. "Put more sugar in."
George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it again and carried it carefully into Grandma.
"Where's the saucer?" she said. "I won't have a cup without a saucer."
George fetched her a saucer. There's a picture.
"And what about a teaspoon, if you please?"
"I've stirred it for you, Grandma. I stirred it well."
"I'll stir my own tea, thanks very much," she said. "Fetch me a teaspoon."
George fetched her a teaspoon. When George's mother or father were home, Grandma never ordered him around like this. It was only when they were by themselves that she treated him so badly.
You know what the matter with you is?
The old woman said, staring at George over the rim of her teacup with those bright, wicked little eyes.
You're growing too fast. Boys who grow too fast become stupid and lazy.
But I can't help it if I'm growing fast, Grandma, George said.
Of course you can,
she snapped.
Growing is a nasty, childish habit.
But we have to grow, Grandma. If we didn't grow, we'd never be grown-ups.
Rubbish, boy, rubbish,
she said.
Look at me. Am I growing? No, certainly not.
But you did once, Grandma.
Only a very little,
the old woman answered.
I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all those other nasty childhood habits, like laziness, disobedience, greed, sloppiness, untidiness, and stupidity. You haven't given up any of those things, have you?
But I'm still only a little boy, Grandma.
You're 8 years old,
she snorted.
That's old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it'll be too late.
Too late for what, Grandma?
It's ridiculous,
she went on.
You're nearly as tall as me.
George had a good look at Grandma. She was certainly a very tiny person. Her legs were so short she had to have a footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the armchair. Daddy says it's fine for me to be a big, tall man, George said.
Don't listen to your granny,
said Grandma.
Listen to me.
How do I stop myself growing? George asked her.
Eat less chocolate,
said Grandma. Does chocolate make you grow?
It makes you grow the wrong way, she snapped. Up instead of down.
Grandma sipped some tea, but never took her eyes from the boy before her.
Never grow up, she said. Always down.
Yes, Grandma.
And stop eating chocolate. Eat cabbage instead.
Cabbage? Oh, no, I don't like cabbage, George said.
It's not what you like or what you don't like,
Grandma snapped.
It's what's good for you that counts, and from now on you must eat cabbage at least 3 times a day. Mountains of cabbage. And if it's got caterpillars on, all the better.
Ooh, George said.
Caterpillars give you brains,
the old woman says. Mum washes them down the sink, George said.
Mum's as stupid as you are,
Grandma said.
Cabbage don't taste of nothing without a few boiled caterpillars. Slugs too.
Not slugs, cried George. I couldn't eat slugs. Yes, I'm thinking about eating slugs. Not slugs, George said. I couldn't eat slugs.
Whenever I see a live slug on a piece of lettuce, Grandma said, I gobble it up, quick, before it crawls away. Delicious!
She squeezed her lips together tight so her mouth became a tiny wrinkled hole.
Delicious,
she said again.
Worms, slugs, and beetly bugs. You don't know what's good for you.
You're joking, Grandma. I never
joke, she said. Beetles are perhaps the best of all. They go crunch.
Oh, Grandma, that's beastly. The old hag grinned, showing those pale brown teeth.
Sometimes, if you're lucky, she said, you get a beetle inside the stem of a stick of celery. That's what I like best.
Oh, Grandma, how could you?
You find all sorts of nice things in sticks of raw celery,
the old woman went on.
Sometimes it's earwigs.
I don't want to hear about it, cried George.
A big fat earwig is very tasty, Grandma said, licking her lips. But you've got to be quick, my dear, when you put one of those in your mouth that has a pair of sharp nippers on its back end. And if it grabs your tongue with those, it never lets go. So you've got to bite the earwig first. Chomp, chomp, before it bites you.
George started edging towards the door. He wanted to get as far away as possible from this filthy old woman.
You're trying to get away from me, aren't you?
She said, pointing a finger straight at George's face.
You're trying to get away from Grandma.
Little George stood by the door, staring at the old hag in the chair. She stared back at him. Could it be, George wondered, that she was a witch? He'd always thought witches were only in fairy tales.
Come closer to me, little boy,
she said, beckoning him with a horny finger.
Come closer to me, and I will tell you all sorts of secrets.
George didn't move. Grandma didn't move either.
I know a great many secrets,
she said, and suddenly she smiled. It was a thin, icy smile, the kind a snake might make just before it bites you.
Come over here, and Grandma will whisper secrets to you.
George took a step backwards, edging closer to the door.
You mustn't be frightened of your old Grandma,
she said, smiling with an icy smile. George took another step backwards.
Some of us,
she said, and all at once, leaning forward in her chair and whispering in a throaty voice George had never heard her use before.
Some of us, she said, have magic powers. They can twist the creatures of this earth into wondrous shapes.
A tingle of electricity flashed through the length of George's spine. He began to feel frightened.
Some of us, the old woman went on, have fire on our tongues and sparks in our bellies. And wizardry at the tips of our fingers. Some of us know secrets that would make your hair stand straight on end and your eyes pop out of their sockets.
George wanted to run away, but his feet seemed stuck to the floor.
We know how to make your nails drop off and teeth grow out of your fingers instead.
George began to tremble. It was a face that frightened him most, that frosty smile and those brilliant, unblinking eyes.
We know how to have you wake up in the morning with a long tail coming out from behind you.
Grandma, he cried, stop!
We know your secrets, my dear. We know secrets about dark places where dark things slive and squirm and slither all over each other.
George made a dive for the door.
It doesn't matter how far you run, he heard her saying. You won't ever get away.
George ran into the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. Chapter 1, Grandma. I'm not surprised he slammed the door. Chapter 2 will be read by Mrs. Cranston and will be put up on the Library Channel tomorrow. I bet you'll you'll be looking forward to it now. Bye.